15 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. We're looking back at the heavyweight fight between Oleksandr Usyk and Anthony Joshua. Ronan Mullen is here with us. Ronan, I went to bed straight as soon as the fight was over because I was absolutely shattered. Didn't even stay up for because I just assumed it was a unanimous points decision with like a clear-cut 4 to 6 round victory for Usyk.
Like you reach that point in life where you don't stay up for the events anymore, right? That's the thing.
Well, I stayed up for the whole fight.
Well, I mean, you did well then. It was an earlier start. It wasn't your 3 a.m. job.
It's true. Yeah. It was the bit where it's like, well, I know the result here, so I'm just going now. But actually,
you didn't even wait to hear the scores read out.
No, because I didn't need to.
Oh,
but
wow.
One of the judges was there going, well, he's sitting there going,
teaching me a lesson.
What a fight from Joshua that was.
So explain how that happened.
Explain how the split decision. Well, Glenn Feldman was accosted after the fight by Rob Tebbett, a roving journalist, who said, what was the story there? And Feldman essentially deferred to his supervisor, saying he couldn't really answer that question.
So Feldman's the judge who scored it in favour of Joshua.
And, you know, the usual line of it's subjective, etc. And to be fair, Joshua boxed much better this time than he did in the last fight, I think. 7-5 Usyk, I can definitely see. I think that was around the score I had. And it's just, you can't make a case that Joshua won 7 rounds. I think Steve Bunce is the only other person I've seen make that case, and he was ringside, so much better vantage point than me or most of us. But a lone voice in the crowd there is Steve Bunce, because I think most people thought quite close in the 9th round. I think if you look at the judges' scorecards, they all had it within 1 round either way.
Right. And
Joshua had such an impressive 9th round that Eddie Hearn was scuttling over to Joshua's corner in between rounds saying, he's gone, you've got him. And then Usyk produces one of the all-time great heavyweight rounds in round 10, puts on a masterclass and just streaks home after that, takes the 11th and the 12th as well, in my opinion, I think in the opinion of most. So any doubt that might have been simmering around going into those championship rounds was eliminated, because Usyk put on a virtuoso display at the end there.
Yeah, when it was right there for Anthony Joshua to reclaim this and to catapult himself into the all-time greats, he couldn't do it.
No, and like it's tricky. Like we did the pre-fight breakdown with Eric Donovan and Declan Taylor, and all of us picked Usyk by stoppage because we thought Joshua would throw caution to the wind and just get caught with a check hook or something on the way in. And as it turned out, he had a very sophisticated game plan, Joshua, but he wasn't winning enough rounds to justify the game plan. It was like fighting not to lose almost in some ways, which is doing him something of a disservice, because if in that 9th round he had like bided his time to that point, and if he had picked a perfect shot and put Usyk away, you would have thought perfect tactics by Joshua. He didn't gas out, you know, he paced himself. But as it turned out, he kind of ran out of time, and we went out of that 9th round thinking the tide had turned irrevocably in Joshua's favour. And as it turned out, like Usyk was the one who came out in round 10, and Joshua had basically given his best shot in that round 9.
Yeah, the start of round 10 was the bit where he could have pressed home some kind of advantage, but actually he just allowed Usyk to regain his life, and as a result of that, Usyk took massive confidence in the fact that the storm was over.
Exactly. I think Joshua, in some sort of cruel irony, his most impactful round was round 9, but as it turned out, it emptied the tank on his behalf and meant that Usyk was able to take over. But Usyk had the resolve and the technical sophistication to pick the correct punches in that round 10 and take over. Like, as much as he displayed skill throughout the fight, he displayed enormous will as well to bounce back. And
Usyk
to reclaim or hold on to those belts that Joshua would throw on the floor a few minutes later. But, you know, I think when the chips were down, quite literally, Usyk was the one that came out on top.
A couple of just bits and pieces in the actual fight itself to talk about then. At the end, when it looked like he was completely gassed, Joshua was leaning on Usyk and kind of wrestling him around the ring. When you're like 2.5, 3 stone heavier, and you know your opponent is essentially fitter than you are or more mobile than you are, why don't you do that from the start? Like, if Tyson Fury was in that round fighting Usyk, it's not just going to be hiding behind the jab. He's going to lean on him, and he's going to weigh him down, and he's going to tire him out. Is that just the ring craft that Joshua doesn't have because he can't do it? What's behind his like being nice to his opponent?
Yeah, like the ring craft point is a pertinent one, because it was where he fell down in the first fight. He bought all the talk about Usyk being this transcendent boxer, this master craftsman, and Joshua wanted to go out in Tottenham and prove, you know, I won an Olympic gold medal as well, I can outbox him. And ultimately you have like a classically trained musician against the New York Philharmonic, because Usyk has a global skill set. He's better than Joshua in every aspect. Like from a technical standpoint, the one thing Joshua does have in his favour is that size, and I thought bringing in Robert Garcia, he was going to go back to that elemental basis a little bit. Like he'd parted ways with Rob McCracken, who was his Olympic coach and his Team GB coach, and gone with Garcia, who's an out-and-out pro guy. And Garcia was telling him after 4 rounds, it's 4-0, you've won every round. And you could definitely make a case Joshua won a couple of those rounds, but there was no way he had the ascendancy in the way his corner was telling him. So the one thing Joshua needs to take away from this, and I think he can take away a lot, I think his stock went up. I think he boxed quite well against possibly the best fighter in the world, but he needs to go back to the fundamentals a little bit, the things that made him an exciting fighter when he was coming through. And it's going to be a bit of matchmaking now, because he's not at the dance now. It's Usyk and Fury who are going on to determine who the best heavyweight in the world is, and Joshua needs to find his way to be the heavyweight champion of the rest of the world and take on the likes of Dillian White again, or Joseph Parker, or fight Deontay Wilder. Like, who wouldn't want to see that? Like, Wilder's fighting Robert Helenius later this year, and if Wilder gets a comeback fight, and you saw the fireworks he and Fury had, throw Wilder and Joshua in there and have an absolute firefight.
Okay, what does the boxing purist such as yourself, what do they think of Anthony Joshua? Because like, I think there's some Kenny Egan coming up, and he would have been speaking about maybe some of the fights that were picked from on the way up, and he was maybe, I don't know, like a great story. Like there was a great story, so there was always a suggestion that the story was crafted in such a way to sort of further his progression, accelerate his progression. Like, you tell me, like, has he spoken of?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I put this, so Declan Taylor's on the beat over there, and I'm kind of fascinated by the perception of Joshua, because that there is, as with most things in life, it's polar opposites. You either fall down on Joshua's a hype job, never had it, or he's, you know, underrated, you know, he's actually a really good boxer, and there's no room for the grey area. Like, I think he has been manoeuvred quite well, but, you know, he has had signature wins as well. You look at his CV, he's beaten some top contenders, and I know that the timeliness of the Klitschko fight at Wembley fell quite favourably for him, and he had to come through hell to ultimately win that fight, but that was the breakout moment for him as a crossover star. So he has had big moments as well, but you go right back to 10 years ago and his first fight at London 2012, and a lot of people in the attendance would tell you he was quite fortunate to get the nod in that opening round, and then lo and behold, he goes on and wins a gold medal in his hometown, and the sky's the limit thereafter. Eddie Hearn sees dollar signs, and that's what they cashed in on ultimately. So he's at a really interesting juncture now. I think he's lost 3 of his last 6. So
I do think that legacy is interesting, right? Because I saw somebody talking about, he saved boxing on Twitter, and then getting absolutely hammered by everybody. It's like, wow, boxing existed. It's like the Premier League kind of thing, right? But actually, there's a genesis of truth in the fact about the heavyweight division in particular. We'd stopped watching, the common sports fan had stopped watching heavyweight boxing when the Klitschkos ruled the division and were fighting in small halls in the middle of Europe against no-marks who never had a chance of beating them. And then, actually, I know you're saying it's the end of the Klitschko career, but somebody had to come and take it. And actually...
Well, Fury did it first, but I think Joshua put the exclamation point on it. Like, Fury went over to Germany and basically neutered the Klitschko ascendancy, whereas Joshua put the final point on it with the knockout and the nature of it. But
was it also during the period where Fury was effectively in retirement, and so it looked like there was nothing there, and at least brought a massive surge of public interest to it again, where we are supposed to be interested in this, because it is incredible theatre, and it's like absolutely brutal as a sport. So it's great to watch.
Yeah,
I think his role in helping to repopularise the heavyweight division is something that stands in his favour.
Yeah, but like, what's going on with him afterwards then? Because this is the thing, like
he became a celebrity and got loads of money. And
yeah,
got rich,
but I mean, like, I'm saying that after the
fight the other night.
After the fight the other night, because it's sort of, you're talking about legacy and sort of all this the power of the personality. And yet it seems there's this other sort of side to this fight, which is, I mean, he's doing the old social media apology the day after, which is never a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it was his own crafted line, but he said something like, I was battling my emotions, I was battling Usyk, and I lost both. So
it's a good line. It was a very good line.
When you put it in that kind of context, or put yourself in that mind frame, you can kind of see after 12 rounds of concussive punishment and apparently crazy temperatures in that arena, the dehydration levels, I think, from both fighters. They both mentioned it after the fight. So that conflicts, or that combination of factors, I think you can kind of see why someone wouldn't be thinking overly clearly, but that was kind of the extreme of that, where he was quite incoherent. And I think if you could take that back, needless to say, he would. The thing with the belts, almost, I think he was told on his way back to the locker room, that wasn't great, maybe you should go back and apologise, kind of escalated from there. So yeah, I think unfortunately for him, he's going to become a meme for the foreseeable future, and I think it's probably in his best interest to get back in the ring and maybe move the story on if he can.
The sweating in the ring was so bad that they had to stop the fight a couple of times to dry down the ring itself. And was it Joshua was getting wiped down, or was Usyk was getting wiped down there?
Yeah, it had been problematic earlier in the night as well, so
maybe we shouldn't be having fights in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, there's a plethora of reasons why we shouldn't be, but that's
sporting hotbed. Very hot.
It turns out it's too hot.
Yeah,
you know,
just sometimes it can be too much.
And it could have an impact on stuff like this.
But I wonder, Fury Usyk, as I mentioned, is the go-to fight now. But I think it probably would sell out a stadium in the UK. Does it have the raw box office attraction to go to Las Vegas or New York? I'm not sure. So there's a very good chance it's going to end up back.
Much better for our bedtime if it doesn't go there, I have to say.
Yeah,
that's really going to test you. That's going to test you when it goes to 4 a.m.
No, it's too late.
Just record it.
So I think there's a very good chance it'll end up back in Saudi.
And is Fury going to take that fight? Presumably he will, because he's already kind of talking about Usyk being a bum, which is, that's code for Tyson. I'm back, baby.
Yeah.
A week later.
Fresh from retirement number 89. He's back. And
so you think it's inevitable that fight will happen next?
Well, Fury can't be seen to, on one hand, be saying, I'm the best heavyweight of this era, I'm the best heavyweight of all time, and then dodge the best contender. Like, Usyk has a very... like, you look at Joshua, or you look at Fury's resume, he obviously beat Klitschko, and that's incomparable, I think, given where Klitschko was at that time. But then his best win, aside from that, is Wilder. And Usyk's just beaten Joshua twice, so... he's beaten the other guy in that little trio. So I think Fury has to beat Usyk to basically copper fasten any notion that he's the de facto number one. I think as things stand, you'd have to give him that crown if he actually does firm up that unretirement. But it's a fascinating fight. Like, I have to give it some thought, because you've got two absolute otherworldly technicians here, and Fury's got the size, and boxing's rife with adages, but one of them is a good big one beats a good little one, and they're two very good ones. But Fury has that size, and it could be difficult to look past that ultimately, because he knows how to use that size in a way Joshua doesn't. Yeah,
that's the bit that you think would put it in his favour. Now, in retrospect, given what we've just seen, surely Tyson Fury is thinking, why didn't I take the 100 million payday and fight Joshua and have a trilogy with him, because I would have beaten him 3 times.
Yeah, I think that fight will come to pass eventually. Joshua could lose his next couple and still the Fury fight would make money, because for all that Joshua could be dismissed in certain quarters, skill set wise, he has got power. And in the heavyweight division, that is an equaliser, and Fury might just lapse at some point in the fight and give Joshua an opening, and you just never know.
It seems to me that there's something introverted about his character in the ring that you can't have if you're going to be an all-time great heavyweight. That actually, when the moment comes, you need to rise to it, as opposed to... it's always in the football pod about Jim Gavin saying, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back in the level of your training. And that's clearly happening to Joshua. But actually, to be the great heavyweight, you need to be able to get up off the canvas the way Tyson Fury did, or you need to be able to do what he did that first time against Klitschko, where it's like you're something bigger in the moment. Like, he's had a great career, he's incredibly rich, it's an incredible story, but if he used to be an all-time great, that 9th round he needed to finish it, or the 10th round he needed to come out and follow it up. But his character was to step back and go, ooh, the moment is here for me and I'm not big enough for it.
Like, it's irrefutable. You look at parallels in the past, and I mentioned Klitschko had his adversity early in his career, a little bit more gung-ho in the first third of his career when he teamed up with Emmanuel Stewart. It was more safety first, belt and braces, but he wasn't afraid to put opponents away either. And then Lennox Lewis had those bolts from the blue defeats, and did get a bit more measured in his approach. But again, like, if he saw an opening to end a fight, he ended it. And I think you can't dismiss the fact that Joshua is not the same fighter as he was before he got knocked out by Andy Ruiz, because that was such a humbling defeat on all levels. Like, how could this Adonis lose to someone like Andy Ruiz? Quite apart from the fact that Andy Ruiz is actually a really good fighter, but it just, the optics were bad. Any notion that Joshua was this, perfect specimen in the non-boxing circles was gone after that, because he lost to this guy who looks like a schmuck. And then, when he beat Ruiz in the rematch, it was quite uninspiring. There were many flashpoints, and then every fight thereafter there's been an absence of jeopardy and a certainty of outcome, I think, in how he went about things. So I think, as I said at the start, I think he needs to go back to the elemental levels a little bit. I think a Dillian White fight would give him the eye of the tiger back, because if you go back and watch their first fight, it wasn't so much a boxing match as just a fight. So I think that could be the one that recaptures it for him if he goes that direction.
Okay, so that's his future. How quickly does the Usyk-Fury fight get made? Can it happen October, November, December, or is it a 2023 thing?
I think it should happen towards the end of the year. It's got as much momentum now as it's going to have. What this sport doesn't need and what this fight doesn't need is this to linger for another 12 months and the two lads to take interim fights in between, and one of them loses or gets injured and it just dwindles away. Because how many chances now have we had where two fighters have had all the belts and could have matched up? Like, you had it with Joshua and Wilder, you had it with Fury and Joshua, now you have it with Usyk and Fury. And at some stage, these two lads just need to get it on. So ultimately, I think that will happen. I think there's enough will there and enough money there, more importantly. So hopefully towards the end of the year, but I think I'm more optimistic. I think this fight will happen actually in the next 6 months anyway.
All right, Ronan, good stuff. Thanks very much.